Welcome to Two Psychics. This is Michael Edley, Evidential medium and mystic, discussing all things spiritual.
Hello, I'm Mary Amy of Two Psychics, an intuitive wisdom coach, tapping into your mystical life and sharing messages I receive about you. Tapping into your mystical life and sharing messages I receive about you.
Good evening, good evening. Welcome to Two Psychics. This is Michael Edley here with my fabulous co-host, Mary Amy. What is up, Mary Amy? How are you?
Hi, welcome to Two Psychics. It's a fill-in episode 58, and here I am. It's August 5th. I'm coming from New York. I'm an intuitive wisdom coach, and Michael is on the Jersey Shore. How are you?
I'm riding the roller coaster of life, I guess you could say. You know, it's been an interesting journey and I'm surfing that wave of life. How about you?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a rough patch the last couple of weeks ever since Elsa passed on June 27th, and I've never had this kind of experience and been so aware. My father passed away 21 years ago, and I do remember going down into a black hole for 4 months. This time I'm really aware. So I'm looking at the different stages and realizing that there's a lot of pain. So I will out of nowhere get angry or cry or not have, and I have no control. So I've decided to stay in my heart space, and I've decided to just let whatever happens happen, surrender.
Yeah, I think that's a good word for it. Surrendering to the process of grief. And that's one thing we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be talking about, grief and processing the emotions throughout that energetic cycle of grief. I think it's a good topic for us to discuss. So many people dealing with death and dying and sickness and all the different things that go with that. And I think part of that is accepting your own process. That like you speaking about surrendering to it. Me too. Like we're both going through this significant energy cycle of tragic occurrences in our lives, and we're not alone in this. Many people are dealing with this and going through it. And I think the one thing that we have to remind ourselves, and we've discussed this many times in the past, but there is no right or wrong way to process your emotions and the sense of grief that you have around whatever's occurring. There is no right or wrong way to process that, but I think we have to accept that we do need to process it, and we do need to allow ourselves patience and grace going through that. It's a very difficult thing to allow to come to the surface and to rise to the surface and sit with it and feel it. But it's so important that we do that, because so much dysfunction can come out of trying to submerge it and trying to push it down and not feel it. And a lot of people want to numb themselves out and kind of feel as if they can numb themselves out from it, that they'll be able to get through it easier. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's actually probably the polar opposite of what you should be doing. You truly should be allowing whatever emotions that you're feeling to rise to the surface. You have to sit with them. And this can truly be one of your most powerful energetic cycles when you allow it to process in the proper way, and whatever way that is for you. But it's, when I say the proper way, I'm talking about allowing these emotions to rise up and sit with them, not try to just fill your schedule with stuff to forget about it or keep busy. And even me, when I was first dealing with a lot of my current situation, I was trying to fill my time to just keep myself busy. And I was like, wow, this isn't what I should be doing. It's good temporarily to take your mind off it. And I do think we need things to take our mind off it at some points, because it can be very overwhelming. But we have to make sure we allow the time and the space to sit with these emotions and allow our body to process it in whatever way we deem necessary, and to try to push these emotions down and not feel them, that can cause so much dysfunction to come to the surface later on. So we have the opportunity to sit with these emotions. We truly need to do that.
It's such an individual process, and everyone deals with grief and loss and mourning in a completely separate way. It's how you process things. For me, I think I did have the denial, and then I just cried a lot. I had a lot of sadness. I'm not somebody that goes around problems or stuffs them. I go right through them, and then it's done. When I go through it, it's very thorough. And that was horrible. That was horrible because I didn't have an escape, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't fill it with anything. I have to say it's, and there's flashes of pain, and I think, oh, Elsa's, I'm about to walk in my home, and I think she's going to be there. Or I'm doing something in the car because she loved the car, so I would take her for rides in the car, and I'll bring up, oh no, yeah, this is what I'm thinking, I'm not saying.
Yeah.
So and then I was horrible. I think I was horrible the last 6 months before it happened, because I didn't realize she was dying. I was in denial, or I didn't know. I didn't know she was dying. And then now I just feel sorry for everyone around me, because I'll just lose it, and I'll just cry, cry, cry. I went to spin class the other day with my boyfriend, and everyone in the class thought he did something wrong because I was so upset. They were looking
Mm.
at him, giving him the evil eye, and he,
People jump into all kinds of conclusions, right? Isn't
I
that?
know people
It's
jump
funny
right,
how that's
like,
the nature of
what did
the
you do
human
to her?
psyche. Yeah.
It's crazy. And I get no indication of that, but there's just a lot of assuming going on. Also, I'm not someone who is a crier out in public. I will
Mm.
cry in solitude. I don't like to be vulnerable that way. I it's a cycle, like you said. I'm in a new cycle,
Yeah.
and I get that. And I am finding there's a lot more time to work on my book, and I'm getting through my book really rapidly.
Mm.
That's positive. I have, and I don't, and I miss her, and I want to miss her. Otherwise, I have guilt. I have this tremendous guilt that she's gone, because I guess I never thought she was going to be gone. I don't know how I'm going to. I think I've also been in depression, and
Yeah,
up and
and
down.
you'll deal with all those waves of emotion, and that's the thing is I think a lot of people have this preconceived notion that the process of grieving and the stages of grieving are like a linear thing that should happen in a certain cycle, and that's not the case. And we'll talk a little bit about there's the Kubler-Ross model, and that's probably one of your most popular models of grief, the 5 stages of grief. That's what most psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, people in the field kind of talk about. They talk about those 5 stages of grief, which start in, denial to anger to bargaining to depression to acceptance.
Hmm.
And there isn't a linear model that can truly be followed because the healing process around grief, it's not a linear process. So there are going to be ups and downs. It is going to be like a roller coaster ride. You may find you're dealing with certain stages in a certain way, but then you bounce back and forth between multiple ones. And, it's very interesting for me because I dealt with some heavy loss and tragedy even early on in my life when I was very young, when I was a teenager. And it's weird because the cycles that I went through then, and obviously I've learned and grown, and obviously I actively work with grief and death and dying as a medium, so it's empowered me and put me into a completely different position and perspective. But I remember going through just this serious depression and an anger, and I got stuck in that for a period of time, with my grandmother that I had missed so dearly, and I wasn't able to see her before she had passed, and there were some different things that had happened which prevented me from seeing her, and I was just so angry, and I remember just finding myself wanting to to cut myself off from everything. I didn't, I went into this debilitating depression, and it was pulling me down into this dark place. And it was the weirdest thing was I had this divine connection to her, and it was one of my first really special uh, connections in my mediumship unfolding. I had connected on many levels, but that was the first significant family member that came to me, and we sat and had this unbelievable discussion, and and connecting to her in spirit. And granted, this isn't something that everyone is going to experience, but we all can experience this. It's just not everyone is going to be open to it and tuned in. But I was truly blessed to have this divine experience with her, and she came to me, and she showed me that I was holding on to a lot of grief and a lot of pain and trauma, that it was my fault I didn't see her. And I was going through this really debilitating process, and connecting to her, I truly had this wisdom and knowledge instilled in me that it wasn't my fault, and it was nothing that could be done. And it was a real healing process. And that's one thing I would challenge anybody out there doing that has lost a loved one, whether that's a family, a friend, a pet, whoever it may be, is don't discredit the signs that they're trying to connect to you, that they're coming back into your space, into your environment, into your atmosphere. Be open to that. Be open to the numbers. Be open to the signs. Be open to, the feathers and the pennies. And, we have to understand they want to connect to us as much as we want to connect to them. And that's the one thing that I get solace in at this point as a medium, is knowing that they're not gone. And I understand it's still so hard to go through the process of grief and the denial and the anger and the depression and the acceptance, that whole process of trying to reach that level of acceptance. And it's a different format for me now, and it's a different process for me now, but I still experience all those stages of grief, no matter how much I know they're still here and I'm still connected to them in the spiritual realm. We still go through that physical loss. And no matter how practiced and how tuned in you are, no matter who you are, where you come from, no matter what your background and no matter where your place in this world is, we're all going to experience all or some of those stages of grief, no matter how prepared you are for it. When that shift happens, you have to allow that process to unfold, and that's one of the things. I think certain people can find this renewal of creativity, and they can honor their loved ones by doing something magical, try to create something new, whether that's a piece of art, a piece of music, something in honor of them. And I think the one thing that we get hung up in is people feel like they have to stay in a state of pain and suffering, and we're all going to deal with pain in this life. If you're human and you're living in this physical world, you are going to deal with pain. There is no way around it. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. But the variable to that is we're all going to deal with pain, and we're all going to go into that moment of suffering. But how long are you going to stay in that moment of suffering? How long are you going to let that debilitate you? And as a medium, that's the one thing I've learned is, for me, it's not productive or conducive to my well-being to stay in that state of suffering. I need to do whatever I need to do to allow myself to process it, allow that grief to unfold, and allow it to uplift me in the best way possible, so I can honor my loved ones. I can honor my family in spirit, my friends in spirit, my pets in spirit, and they'll vicariously key in and lock into your energy and try to help uplift you through that process. But we have to stay open to that. We have to be tuned into it. And in grief and dealing with that tragedy and the pain and the suffering of it, sometimes we can get lost in it. And it's a matter of trying to find our way through the darkness and navigate it in any way possible. And for me, in a tragic point of my life that I went through, about 10 years ago or so, I found writing music and creating truly brought me through that pain and suffering, and truly allowed me take a really negative thing that was going on and turn it into a positive.
I think that you can't, I personally, I don't suggest rushing through any of this and just have
No, not
try
at
to
all.
go right into the acceptance and just say, okay, it's not going to be good for a while. I don't know when
Mhm.
it's going to end. And everyone around me, I'm so sorry. That's what I say. I'm so sorry. And I do have moments where I'm giggling and I'm laughing. So it's coming, it's happening, it's coming. And the healing process is, you know, some ways I would say for me is try to spend as much time on your own by yourself as you can outside in nature because that's healing. I've spent a lot of
Yeah.
time. I went out to Gilgo Beach, you know, out past Jones Beach, and every weekend in the last, you know, month. And that's great because it's you go in the water, the salt water. I've been writing how I feel. I've been doing some cleansing in my home where I've been cleaning out space and removing things around. I have a area that's just designated to things left from her. So then I feel like, okay, here, you know, this is a representation, but everyone's going to obviously figure a way for it to be good for them. Like you mentioned, creatively, I'm actually dedicating my book to her,
Yeah.
and it's the book is really going along swimmingly. I printed out 50 of pages so far, and I had someone look at it, and she said bestseller, and I said great, bestseller. People are going to want to read this. And then she said, "You're such a good writer," and I said, "I'm not a writer." But apparently I'm a writer. So it's exciting. I mean, there's a lot of exciting things to come for both of us, and it's this is a learning experience for me. Like I said, I haven't had a lot of loss in the past, and I mean, this is a part of life, right? I guess I've been lucky so far that this is what I've had to deal with. I've had other things, but I mean, I'm glad that I had you to actually have a conversation with who gives it some thought and is coming from both sides of it. Because
Yeah.
it's not like you can talk to just anybody about this. Nobody really, you know, it's your stuff.
Well, and the one thing that I think some people have a hard time with, we both, tragically lost pets of ours that were like our kids. They were like children to us. And what we have to understand is not everyone is going to be able to perceive things in the way we've experienced them. A lot of times people are coming from their own experiences, their own, so someone that's never had a pet, someone that's never had a dog, a cat, a horse, a bird, whatever that pet was to you, may not be able to understand and wrap their head around the loss and the grief you're feeling around that and say, oh, you should get over that, or, that should happen a lot quicker because it wasn't a human. Well, no, 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 not at all. I think the people that care about you and love you and want to see the best for you will allow you to process your grief in whatever way you need to process it. And these moments in time can be a great unfolding for, maybe people that you need to say, all right, well, maybe I need to push you out a little farther, or maybe you're not meant to be that close to me, or maybe you're not meant to be in my circle, or maybe you have your own growing to do to where we can come to an understanding. But I can tell you these cycles of grief, and anyone that's dealing with any kind of tragedy, no matter what that tragedy is in your life, we go through these experiences, and these experiences can give us wisdom and knowledge beyond any other learning experience. And that's what these are. These are learning experiences. We can truly learn on the deep depths of our soul, who we are, what's important to us, what's integral to our well-being. Who do we want to surround ourselves with? What environments do we want to be in? What do we want to spend our time in this physical world putting our attention to? And sometimes it's moments like these that can bring clarity to those situations. And, sometimes through these dark clouds, we can rise above and soar like the eagle and truly see what matters. But we can absolutely use these moments in time as divine pieces of wisdom to learn more than we could ever study in a book or in a class or at a workshop. These moments in time can instill divine wisdom upon us. And that's something everyone needs to realize. These moments, as tragic as they are, on the flip side, they can be such a propelling, uplifting period of time when we find a way to navigate them in the best way possible. And I know that sounds easier said than done, but there is a process. And again, I talk about, we all experience pain. Living this life, and the more and the deeper you love, the deeper and the more broad that cut of pain is going to be. But the thing is, how do you handle the suffering end of it? Do you want to just be debilitated and be engulfed in suffering and pain and tragedy of it? Well, I can tell you, your ones on the other side don't want that for you. They don't want to be the cause of you going into this deep, debilitating depression. And as hard as it is for us to process it in the moment, we can truly use these moments to push us through any kind of, breakthrough that we need to get ourselves to the next level. And grief is such a powerful cycle that when we can utilize it in a way that helps us find clarity, helps us get insight to who we are, who we need to be, how we need to grow, then our loved ones are on the other side, smiling and shining down on us, going, yeah, we utilize this for your highest and best. As tragedy will occur in everyone, it's a matter of, how do we deal with the suffering end of it? How do we process the suffering? And are you going to allow yourself to get stuck there, or are you going to find a way to break through that? And it's so important we find a way to break through it. And I'd like to talk a little bit about maybe the stages of grief. I know a lot of people listening maybe haven't dealt with grief or haven't studied it. We'll talk a little bit about the Kubler-Ross model, and I think the first stage, denial. When we have these defense mechanisms and these moments of like numbing and disbelief. Even this last cycle of grief that that I'm in. There was still a moment of disbelief. And there was a numbness, and we have to sit with that and we have to feel that. But the thing is, you can't get stuck there. You have to allow that to process. And then I also experienced the anger. Could I, should I, what could I have done differently? Why didn't I listen when I was getting some intuitive nudges of things that were going on? I don't necessarily, there's the bargaining stage that they say falls after that. I don't find myself falling into that stage at all at this point in time, and bargaining with a higher power or God, or, bring that person back, bring that loved one back, make this different, because I understand the process, and I understand that that isn't going to happen. They aren't going to be brought back. They aren't gonna appear. But what will happen is, as a medium, we have to understand that they're never truly gone. And one of the moments when people are bargaining, I find they start having a lot of dreams about their loved one. And a dream visit can be one of the most beautiful things. So we can't discredit that as something that truly isn't going on, because when we're dealing with heavy tragedy, grief, the pain and the suffering around that, in our dreamlike state is when we'll be opened and tuned into them. So understand, when you're having those vivid dreams of your loved ones, they are visiting you. They are coming back, and they are trying to give you some guidance and insight, and letting you know they're okay. Even if they don't speak to you, even if you just see them, even if you have some crazy, vivid, wild dream that something else is going on, but they're there. Well, they're imprinting their energy on you, and they're showing you that they're okay. And then we go into the aspects of depression. And I think a lot of people, this is a stage that they can get stuck in, and this is when I talk about the suffering aspect and the depression and the despair. This is an area that we have to do whatever we can to not get stuck. And, this can be a much different process for many different people. And there is no right or wrong way to get through this. But it's in these moments when we're depressed, or we feel despair, and there's nothing that we can do. Well, this is where you can start learning, about your psychic abilities and mediumship, and learning the signs and the symbols and how to connect, and, what can you do on your energetic self to help raise your vibration to connect and to get the messages. And the last stage, and I do believe there's more than the 5 stages of grief that they talk about in the Kubler-Ross model, but the last stage is acceptance. And I think a lot of people get stuck thinking that they're accepting it out of a out of the realm of happiness, and that's not it at all. I think it's more so we're just acknowledging that it occurred, and we're kind of sitting with that energy now that yes, this tragic occurrence had happened, and I can acknowledge it happened and maybe start processing it in a positive way. And but I do feel like they're out of those 5 stages of grief, of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I do believe there's the 6th stage of grief, and I think that's the most empowering one. And I think that's creating something new, creating a new chapter. And I think that can instill hope. I think it can uplift us. And I think that's where a lot of the beautiful magic of this life can occur, is when we create something new. We start a new chapter, and we honor those that we're grieving. We honor that loss. We find a way through that tragedy to turn those lemons into lemonade. And it's so important that if we're a creative type, and whatever that is for you, whether that's music, whether that's art, whether that's building, whether that's designing, whether that's writing, if you can really tune into that pain, you can morph that pain into some beautiful energy that can be truly empowering in the creative endeavor that you're trying to pursue. And I think some of the greatest music, some of the greatest art, some of the greatest books that were ever written, a lot of that has come out of deep tragedy, and deep grief. And if we research and we look at, the biographies of certain musicians, certain artists, certain writers, certain poets, some of their best work has come from tragedy. And that's not by mistake. There truly is the most powerful energy behind the grief.
I was doing the bargaining the very first day and the second day after it happened. I was trying to make, oh, just,
Mhm.
bring them back, bring the dog back, or where is the dog? Where's the puppy
Yeah,
dog? And I was trying
yeah.
to figure all that out. I couldn't process this
Mhm.
puppy dog's going to be so confused. Where's their mom? Where's their mom? Because I'm the mom.
Yeah, yeah.
This puppy dog believed it was human. I have had, and this has been comforting to me. I've had synchronistic moments where it's obvious I'm in the right place. The
Mm,
most
yeah.
impossible crossover happens, and it's like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be right now. Deal with it. Like, suck it up and get through it. You're going to be okay. And this is what you're supposed to live through. This is the experience I'm supposed to have. And I maybe part of what puts you through some of these stages maybe is what is your thoughts of the afterlife? And
Mm,
some people don't know. They
yeah.
don't, even though I had experienced near death, 2 near death experiences, I still found myself saying, oh, really? What if? So, and I think this is having something like this, a loss, a serious loss in your life. For me, it was the puppy dog was almost 12 years old, got her when she was 3 months old. I questioned. It brought me to a place of, what do I believe? And I guess that it was the shock. But within 48 hours, I started to kind of get off the ledge about that part of it, because I do believe in other realms and afterlife. And I did have dreams right away with Elsa. And she was present and she was moving and she saw me. So, but for those out there questioning, is there, do we just pass and they don't believe in a spirit necessarily, or they haven't been exposed to that? My belief is that our spirit lives on. It's an infinite. It just transmutes, the energy transmutes into another form. So I know that I will see Elsa again, and maybe the time in the afterlife is not the same as here. So it might just be like, oh, there you are now. But I know that I believe that there's angel among us, present in this physical reality. Maybe we just can't see them physically, but they are in the afterlife. This is my belief system. And there is divine light protecting our loved ones, and they're going to a much more serene and harmonious place than we have here on earth.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing too. If we've lost a loved one and through the end months, days, weeks, whatever that is of your loved one, if they're going through debilitating illness and suffering, you know, when they release from the body, they're free of all that. And that's one thing that always comes through in readings for someone that was going through a debilitating illness, or they lost, use of part of their body, or they couldn't speak. They actually now are free of that pain, and it's a beautiful thing. They can come back and validate, well, they were hearing the song or the poem or the scripture that was read to them when they were in hospice, or in those dying moments they heard those final words. So we need to understand that even if we don't think they can hear us or they know what's going on, more often than not they do. So that's why I tell people, if you're with a loved one that's going through a debilitating illness or has Alzheimer's or dementia, and you don't think they know what you're doing, or they're unconscious, or you feel they're unconscious and they can't connect. I see it all the time that they hear the words, or they feel the energy, they feel the love. So it's so important that we do those things, sing that song, read that scripture, read the chapters of the book, whatever that is to you, and that special energetic connection you have with your loved one. Don't think you're doing it in vain. Don't think you're doing it for no reason whatsoever, because they understand it, they hear it, and they connect to that energy. And I get that proof and those validations all the time in my readings. So it's so important, that we honor that process. But when they cross over, yeah, they're free of that body, they're free of the pain. And like for me, with Finn, my boy Finn, that had passed, he had passed suddenly. And it's funny because sometimes insight and guidance won't come from your spiritual friends, or your other psychic mediums and colleagues. Sometimes it'll come in the most bizarre way. And I had a friend that is probably one of the most non-connected, one of my musical friends, and just so not connected to the spiritual realm. And I could try to give my insight and guidance, but he's so stuck in this earthly realm. But I love him for it, and it's funny hanging out with him. But when I was thinking about Finn and how Finn had passed so sudden, and it was so unexpected, had no idea. And for those of you that don't know, we feel like he had a stroke and a heart condition, but he was healthy to the end. I'd just taken him for a walk. He had loved it. He was barking. I mean, he was in his moment, in his glory. We came back home, and within an hour or two later, he had passed suddenly and was gone. But and I had a friend, talking to me about this, and he said, well, you know what, Mike? He said, think about this. If you're going to go, wouldn't you want to live life to your fullest and just go and not deal with the sickness or the illness or the pain and the tragedy of that, of that sickness, and just kind of you come in on your terms and you go out on your terms? And you know what? Yeah, that was a pretty magical thing, that there was no pain and suffering, and I wasn't prepared for the loss, and it to happen that quick. But it wasn't about me, and it was about him living his life to the fullest. And I'm just glad I could have been a part of that. And I'm glad, out of all my dogs, they all went through some type of, cancer or sickness or illness, where they did good for a long period of time, but they still dealt with that, where, he had lived life to the fullest, to the very, very end, and it really wasn't until he said that to me that it really occurred to me, like, wow, you know what? Yeah, you're right. You're right. And, and that's something I have to honor. So sometimes the process and the things we need to hear don't always come from the places and the people we expect to hear them from, so that's another thing, is be open and be receptive, and some people don't know how to handle, and you speak about this a lot, Mary. Some people don't know, they don't really have a belief system, or they don't know, or they don't, and this friend of mine probably doesn't really think about the afterlife or spiritual existence much, if at all. But I got, some real healing insight and guidance from the words he spoke to me, and it was one of the most unusual places that I did not think I was gonna hear that, So be open to, all avenues of healing, and they'll get their message through to us, and that's the thing, is accepting on your own terms the process, and there is no right or wrong way. For some of us it may be days, some of us it may be weeks, some of us it may be months that it takes us to process this. And I could tell you, grief will come up, and even for me, there's moments where I think about things that have happened, long ago, and they still come to the surface, but it's now they come to the surface for a different reason, or a different meaning, or to give me insight and guidance, or to look back and say, I've grown so much from that point. And I have to be proud and honor my path and my journey. And if I didn't go through those things, I wouldn't be the person I am, and I wouldn't be able to help those that are also going through it. And the same with you. You've gone through tragedy and grief and different things, but if we can't explain it when we're going through it, and sometimes it's so hard for us to wrap our heads around it. But I do believe there is a method to the madness, and even in the heaviest trauma, we can find, sparkles of light, glimmers of hope, and we can all find that. And when we can utilize that again, for our highest and best, we can find a way to help others, we can find a way to grow, and we can find a way to manifest the best possible person we can be. And I can tell you, if I didn't go through the tragedies and the grief that I went through, I would not be the person that I am today. I had to go through those moments, I had to experience those things for what I needed to expand and to learn. And and I pull the wisdom from that now, and I hope going through that I can give someone else insight and guidance on how maybe they can maneuver their situation that they're dealing with.
I have to say, the silver lining for me, there's a couple. First off was that I had the privilege to know this living being, this living creature, Elsa,
Yeah.
because it was only joy. It was only fun and joy until
Yeah.
December. So the last 6 months was a rough and rocky road. And I do know it was interesting. Right after she passed, even that day, had prayed so much. I was praying so much that it felt like, first of all, I was definitely being lifted, that it was seamless, me and I guess the angelic realm, God source, whatever divine energies. I look at that, and in my memory right now, those first few, I guess it was the 48 hours after it happened, it was so powerful the way I felt. And I can't pinpoint, was it because I was praying so much, or I was just literally surrounded by this energy that was really good energy, pure positive whole energy. And that's the silver lining, that I had that experience, and the experience of Elsa. And I'm just going to keep moving, and I don't know if I will get another pet after that. I don't know.
Well, it's a process. For me, that's one of the most bizarre things, is for the last 21 years of my life, I've had, dogs in the house, and they've been such an integral part, and that's what you had talked about, coming into the house, and just the shift of the energy, and things are so different, and like me, prepping to do the show tonight. This is the first show that I've done with two psychics that I didn't have, dogs barking in the background or worried about a dog trying to jump in and get on camera or, and it's weird. It's a process. And that's the thing. We have to honor the process. We have to give ourselves the grace to feel those moments that, like the other night, there would be points where my dog would be laying on the side of the bed. He would sleep next to me. He had a great Tempur-Pedic little mattress. He was so comfortable. And, I reached down to pet him, and he wasn't there. And it was just like, wow, wow, and it kind of shocked me a little bit. But I think the one thing, like you had honored your pet and did everything you could. I think that's the one thing, if for anyone out there that's grieving, specifically the loss of a pet, when you've done everything in your heart you could for them, we've even like cooking for your dog, doing whatever you can to try to help them through whatever they're navigating. I think if we can honor that energy, that in our heart, we truly love them with unconditional love. We felt their unconditional love, unlike any other. You're gone for 5 minutes, for 5 days, 5 hours. That dog is so happy to see you when you come back. We have to honor those moments. We have to honor that joy and that connection we had with them. And it's it's truly special love. That it's so different from the love of humans, the emotions around humans, and the human connection. It just completely unconditional. And the interesting thing I heard someone talking about, dogs just have this appreciation for life. You think about a day of a dog's life is like a week in a human's life, and their time is short. And it's almost like they know their time is short, and they honor each day and they enjoy each day. Every car ride, every walk, every meal. They just enjoy it. And there's so much happiness and there's so much love in each moment that they live. I think as humans, they can give us a great example of us honoring our own lives and our own paths and our own human connections and the love that we share with people, and honor those moments. And don't be on your phone at every concert and every family event or every dinner. Share the story, share the wisdom, share the time together, and honor those moments. It's so important. We get so caught up in the past and the future that we aren't present, and that's one thing we talk about all the time, and it's connecting to your loved ones. And part of this process of learning about these energetic connections and learning about your psychic abilities and your mediumship abilities and your healing abilities, a lot of that comes in the present moment. A lot of your connection to your loved ones and the signs and the synchronicities they're trying to send us, it comes in the present moment. So I think our pets can truly show us to live in the present moment like they do. And, if we don't take anything else from the cohabitation and the coexistence we've had with them, I would say that would be the one thing: is be present and embrace the joy of the connections that we have in the present moment.
You just reminded me that it's about time that I do a memorial for her, have some kind of event with her best friend and my family, and we speak about her. Because like when you just said that, I just got a flash of flowers, and I said, where are these flowers? And I have her ashes, but I don't sense that it's something for me to get rid of.
Yeah.
You don't know until it happens, right? What you're gonna do, unless someone has
Mm.
a last wish. But I sense that I keep the ashes, and I'm going to do some kind of memorial for her. Yeah, that's interesting. That just came through. Whatever you just pushed me. You just
Yeah.
pushed me.
One of the cool things that I had come through in a reading not too long ago, and it's interesting how our loved ones in spirit will connect and give the guidance and insight that they're still around, they're still following our date, stuff that the family is doing. They're following the birthdays and the anniversaries and the parties and the celebrations and the births, and it was very interesting. In one reading, I had a father coming through, and he was giving me a lot of stuff about, sitting at there was a birthday coming up in the family,
Mhm.
and he started showing me that he's going to be with them, and he's sitting at the table, and he's enjoying, even though he can't taste the cake in spirit, he was enjoying it, and he described the cake that he was going to be participating in the experience. And I started telling the family this, and wow, the shock and awe that came from that. I started describing the cake that he was showing me and that he was there. And the most beautiful validation came from that, that they were having a cake designed in honor of him and the child they were celebrating the birthday that was named after him. And he showed me the cake, and so I was able to bring through some really crazy evidence. And I knew nothing about this family, or that the child was named after him, and that they had made a cake in honor of this, and they were setting, there was a place setting for dad, and there was a chair and a plate, and it was just the coolest thing. And he thought it was fantastic. I could tell you, in the spirit realm, he was jumping for joy that they were still keeping his memory alive. They were honoring him, and they chose to name a child after him, in his memory. And it was just such a beautiful connection I had with this family. And for me to be able to validate that their father was still around, and then he brought through a ton of other information that they were just blown away. And this was a family that I had done a private reading with, and the daughter, the son, and they knew they were open to there being other dimensions, other spiritual realms, that death isn't the end. But even if we are open and tuned into that, sometimes we need that sign, we need that synchronicity, we need that message. And that's a beautiful thing of why I do this. I was able to bring that message through for that family and show them the continuity of life exists beyond the physical death. And when they can give me that validation, there's no way for anyone that's sitting with me to be able to say, wow, that was made up, or there's no way that can happen. We truly show with evidence
Mhm.
that our loved ones are still around us. They're vicariously living life through our experiences, and it's the most beautiful thing when we can honor them and honor their memories and keep that memory alive, because they are still connected to us. And it's so important we honor that.
Hmm. Now I know I'm gonna have to go through this, but I have to do it. It's time for me to do this memorial. Maybe in the next few days, over the weekend, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
I'll send out an invitation to my family. I appreciate
And
this.
yeah, and it's good. It would be a good thing. And I think the interesting thing too, what I find is when we're processing the the grief around our pain and suffering of loss, or whatever the tragedy is that we're experiencing, a lot of times the people around us don't really know how to talk to us or how to handle it. So it's good for us to say, hey, I want to do a memorial, or I want to do this, and kind of speak what's on our minds. Let people know what you're experiencing, let people know what you're feeling, because a lot of times people don't know how to react to that. They don't know how to open a conversation, or they feel, weird, or, that they're not sure, if you're going to take that, in a negative way. So I think it's important that we open these conversations, and we have these conversations with the people that are around us, our friends and family, so they know it's okay to talk about it, it's okay to honor it, and let them know, hey, I'm not. And some people maybe aren't ready to process it and need more time and need more self-reflection, and that's okay too. But I think when we can start the conversation, and we can have the conversations around death and dying, it opens up a whole new experience for not just us, but for those around us. And maybe what we're dealing with can give some insight and guidance to those that are still processing their own stuff, and haven't been ready to allow it to unfold in the way that we are, and maybe we can open that channel.
Mm. Beautiful things.
But yeah, and I think that's what it is. It's just it's accepting it on your own terms and in the own unique way that you need to process it. There is no right or wrong. There is no specific duration. And even, going through those 5 stages of grief, that, it's not a linear thing. It's not going to be the straight thing. You may bounce around. You may go from one to another, back to another, back, and it may shift for a period of time. But that's the thing, is not getting stuck in the suffering, not getting stuck in the despair, and the one thing I think certain people get stuck in when they're having these problems of breaking through the grief is they kind of find this like martyr syndrome. Like, I have to go into grief and despair. I suffer, or I'm not honoring them. I'm not, I'm going into like this martyr mentality, and that's what I have to do because that's the right thing to do. I can tell you, absolutely not. Your loved ones on the other side don't want you to be a martyr for their passing. They want you to move through in the best way you possibly can, and they don't want you to be stuck. And for some of us, it's almost like we feel if we find happiness after their passing, or that's wrong, or that no, not at all. Our loved ones want us to find happiness. They want us to be able to transcend through this in the best way possible. So you don't need to feel as if you need to be a martyr in honor of them, because that's not honoring them. That's getting yourself stuck in a debilitating negative cycle, which they don't want that for you.
Mm. I think you can personally, I see it would be easy to spiral, into it and get stuck somewhere.
Yeah.
I was lucky the other day. I was having a moment and I couldn't get out of it, and I felt it. I was in it and it felt really bad. And I was crying, and it was all this emotion, but it wasn't like I was remembering anything. It was just attacking me, this emotion. And I had to leave
Mm.
my home, and I had to do something. And it was good because it forced me to get out of where I was, and I had to go to the store to get something. And then I remember walking through the parking lot going, oh, it's off me, because it's just a change. Sometimes when we change it up, we can't stay in the same place, or
Yeah.
we and walk out if you're not okay. And you know what, if someone makes you feel uncomfortable about how you're feeling, then get away from them, because they're not going through it, and it's okay. You allow yourself to have the feelings. Whatever you're going through is normal for you, and that's what I've been saying to
Hmm.
myself. Okay, I'm so sorry, not going to be great right now, but this is how I'm dealing with it. And then when I've dealt with it, then I'll be better. I mean, it's a process, like you said. So I don't know how long it's
Yeah.
going to last. I'm just surrendering to it. I'm in my heart space. I'm trying to come from more of a place of love for everyone else, and everyone has to forgive me right now. That's
Well,
right.
and that's I love how you describe it. It really is. You're coming from a place of surrender. And I think sometimes, that's the most powerful thing we can do, is not try to control it and surrender and allow it to unfold, allow it to unfold in the way it needs to. And the interesting thing too, that I try to explain to people when I'm talking about death and dying, and when I'm dealing with a family that lost a child, that is so tragic, and so hard to wrap your head around. But there's points in time before we come into this world that we do have exit points, and I do believe, for whatever reason, even if we can't wrap our around it, some people come into this world for a short period of time, and when their job is done, it's done, and we can't make sense of it a lot of times when we're going through that tragedy and that grief. But I do believe, there is a purpose and a reason for it, even if we can't wrap our heads around it while it's occurring. You know, there absolutely are, as humans, when we're a soul and we're coming into this physical realm, we absolutely have exit points, you know, and I don't believe everyone has the same exact thing going on with their exit points. You know, there can be different cycles that we can maneuver through. So someone may have two or three exit points, but someone else may only have one. They come into this world, their job is done, they instill what they need to do, they shift whatever energetic parameter needs to be shifted, and then they're gone, you know. And sometimes it's so hard for us to wrap our head around, but as a medium, I see this, and I see that, you know, we can't always explain it and we can't always make sense of it, but there is some type of divine purpose behind it. But yeah, it's a process. It is a process, and again, it's accepting this process on your terms and not letting the outside noise interfere with that process, you know, because we have to go through it in our own unique way.
Okay. I was going to get on another topic, but I don't feel like it's appropriate tonight. So we'll talk another time about that. I do want to let everyone know that we are doing a show for the Edge Network, and we're supposed to be live on Thursday. I will post on our Facebook, Two Psychics Facebook podcast page if in fact we're supposed to be live on Thursday evening. I believe it's 8 or 8:30, and it's with Kelly Wagner, and she has a magazine, Edge Magazine, and it's the Curious Show, and she's also going to be our guest. We've kind of had some flip-flopping with guests. We're supposed to have a couple of shows next week as well with some guests, and
Good stuff. Good
right,
stuff coming up.
yeah, some really good stuff, and so look for that, and you can find Michael at ihavethespirits.com and myself, maryamyofficial.com, and Michael gives readings and I give readings and healings, and I have my books. And anything else you'd like to add, Michael?
Well, I would say if you are on Facebook, don't forget to like and follow the Two Psychics podcast. You know, we'd love to have you following our stuff of what we're doing. And then when we have cool things going on, like us being on the Edge magazine, doing that podcast on Thursday, all the links will be on there. You can jump on. You know, I have an event I'm doing tomorrow here in New Jersey, central New Jersey. But when I have events coming up, you know, you'll see some of those on my Eye of the Spirits with Michael Edley Facebook page. You'll see some of them on the Two Psychics podcast page. Also, don't forget about Mary Amy's Dream Journal. So find her on Amazon, her Dream Journal, and her new book will be on there shortly. And if you're dealing with grief or some type of tragedy and you want to try to get into the meditation zone and you're finding a hard time, you can pick up my CD. You can see that Divine Journey of a Mystic Soul. It has hemisync and binaural tones and all that cool stuff to get you into your Zen state of mind, to help you meditate, to help you get into that zone, to release the chakra system, to connect with your energetic self, to help release and navigate grief and things like that that are going on. So Divine Journey of a Mystic Soul. And yeah, I think that kind of covers most of it. We have also, if you'd like to get a mug or a t-shirt, where can they find
Spread
all our
Shop,
cool stuff?
Spread Shop, and you can find that on the link for this show tonight. There's a link, Spread Shop. Also, I wanted to just say about the live on Thursday. It's going to be on Facebook, so you can connect on it on, I believe, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I don't know if there's any other channels, but you can find it. So we'll post it on our podcast if we are doing it Thursday. We're supposed to. And next week we have a Palladian channel, and we have an angel card reader. and just look again on our Facebook page. And you can find our shows on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, Apple, Rumble, and YouTube.
You can find us everywhere.
Yeah, I'm
So
here. And
that's it. So
everyone, blessings
again,
to everyone.
yes, thank
Sending
you so
love
much,
and
Mary
light.
Amy. I think this was a good
Yeah,
it wasn't, I think this is something a lot of people out there need to hear, and need to hear how people like you and I navigate grief. I think it's an important conversation to have had. So thank you for being a part of this beautiful conversation. And again, anyone out there, just understand it's a process like anything else, and there is no right or wrong way to navigate it. But we are here for you. So follow Two Psychics, and we would love to take your questions, and we would love to hear what you want to hear. So reach out to us on Facebook, and we'll
yeah.
talk to you very soon.
Okay, everyone, be well. We'll see you soon. Join us on Thursday
Peace.
evening. Bye.
See you soon.